Hey everybody, Matt here. Another episode of Matt Makes Stuff. It's kind of whatever. Anyway, today I'm going to be making a bowl, a yarn bowl for my mom for Mother's Day. And I went to my local woodcraft store and found this beautiful piece of Brazilian cherry. Really got some good grain in it. I think it'll turn out real nice. It's covered with a coat of wax right now. The manufacturers, when they cut the wood, they put a wax coating over it so that it doesn't absorb a whole lot of moisture. So there you go. It's fairly heavy, pretty dense. Ought to be an interesting turn. So my last video I rambled on and on and on about blanks and all that other stuff, and maybe it was a little informative, and I hope you enjoyed it. But this video is going to be more about just get it done. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are at the prep table / assembly table, and what we got to do first is I like to check and make sure they're relatively square. And this one's pretty close. So you got to find the center of this piece so that we know the circumference of the bowl that we can make. So I got my square here, and that looks like it's about 6 1/8. So half of 6 1/8 is 3 1/16, so we'll put a little mark right there. And then this way we are just a hair over 6, about 6 1/16, so we'll say right at 3. So there's our center mark right there. Probably can't see it, but it's right there. Okay, so once we have the center, we get our fancy little compass. Put that guy right there in the middle. I know my mom will appreciate my skill with one of these. It's an inside joke. So you get that, and you go to just about to the edge, and then the wax makes it a little bit, kind of gives you an idea. Let's see. And you just basically draw the circle. What that does is it gives you an idea of where you can cut off the corners, because if you cut off the corners, that's less material you have to turn off with the lathe, which these square edges here can play hell with your tools. So then you take your 45 and you go and just mark off where you're going to lop those corners off. And give it a little room for slop. There you have it. You have your corners. I don't know if you can see those or not, but I just made the marks in the wax, and I can use those to go by for making my cuts. I feel like I need to make it known that this is my first attempt at making a bowl. So you guys will take this journey with me, and hopefully it'll turn out good. So anyway, on to the next step. Okay, we're over at the bandsaw. We're going to go ahead and cut off these corners that we marked off in the last step. So here we go. So there you go. It's now a nice octagon shape, and those corners there will come off a whole lot easier on the lathe than these corners would. There's a lot of material right there you'd have to, in these corners, there's a lot of material right there you'd have to cut off with the lathe, and hardwood like this is pretty rough on the tools. So, alright, so we're back at the workbench, and part of prepping for turning the bowl is to mount it to the lathe. Here you see I've got my corner pieces that I'm saving these because they're nice, a nice wood, and I can use those to make segmented blanks. I can, turn them and make some pretty interesting pieces out of that. So those can be put off to the side. But this right here is my bowl turning head, and you got my center point right there. So I line this up so that plus is right in the middle of there, and I mark 3 of these holes like that. Okay, so they're marked on there, and then I'll drill some pilot holes. What the pilot holes do is they just make it easier. Now, in some cases, a pilot hole is there, you put there to keep the wood from splitting as you drive the screw into the hole. In this case, I'm putting the pilot holes in there just because that'll make it easier to drive these screws into the wood and get them nice and even and straight. You also want to check and make sure your plate is sitting flat on the wood. Okay. Alright, so we're back at the lathe. I've got my piece of Brazilian cherry mounted to my bowl turning mount. And the threads in here match up with the threads on the spindle. So we just take it and spin it on there. That. Alright, so just spin it and make sure it's good. Yeah, there we go. Alright, and I got my tool rest. Again, you want to make sure your piece will turn and not hit the tool rest, because if it does, it could be disastrous. Alright, looks like it's clear. Tighten it down, check it one more time. Alright. I don't have a dust collector for this type of work, so I just use my shop vac, the big sweeping head to do that. So we got to ramp up the speed on the lathe. Like a good speed right there. We'll go with that one. Respirator, because we're working with wood. Not a respirator, it's a dust mask. And we'll grab the roughing gouge. That big boy right there should be good and sharp. Make sure you always use nice sharp tools. And here we go. Alright, so the vacuum thing didn't work quite as I hoped it would, but live and learn. Alright, so we've got it roughed down to a round shape, got all the corners knocked off of it. And there's a little bit of checking in there, but we'll clean that up. Alright, we're going to use the spindle gouge. So what we're doing is we're trying to cut the rough shape of the bowl. This is the outer portion of the bowl. This will be the bottom. So got to get it rounded some more. So we'll move the tool rest. Hey, you can see all the checks that were in there are gone now. The lighter strokes will help you get rid of that. So now I got to cut a tenon in the bottom so that the lathe chuck can hold this side of the bowl so we can cut the inside. Alright, so for cutting the tenon we're going to use the skew. Alright, so we've cut our tenon. Let's get a little sandpaper. We'll do some 120. Clean out that tenon a little bit. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the tenon is so that I can mount it on this chuck using these pieces right here. That will allow, it mounts right on there so we can flip it around and put it on the lathe this way and turn the inside of the bowl. Got a little check right there to figure out, sand that down and get it out of there. Hit it with a little 60 grit, that ought to cut it out of there pretty quick. Yeah, now we'll hit it with some 120 and that ought to get it all the way out of there. Okay, and so just like with the pins, I'll wipe it down with some denatured alcohol to get the majority of the dust off of there and see what it looks like. So we got it all sanded down to 220. Looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and put a finish on it. I'm going to use Minwax fast drying clear gloss. Seems to be a pretty good, it's durable, gives a nice shine, and it lasts. So it seems to be a good finish for a project like this. I'm going to have your lathe on the lowest setting. So we put the chuck into the tenon and swapped it around, so now the chuck's over here and the faceplate is on this side. I'm going to go ahead and take the screws out and remove the faceplate so we can get started turning the inside of the bowl. Alright, so turning the inside of the bowl, we'll put the tool rest over here. There's a lot of material to take out of the inside of this, so it's going to take some time. I'm going to start with the skew and kind of flatten this out, get some of that wax off of this area right here, which is going to be the outer top edge of the bowl, so we can get the contour of that. And then we'll start working our way into digging out the bowl itself. You can see all the wax coming off of there. I'm gonna ramp up the speed of the lathe. So after a whole bunch of turning, cutting, sanding, everything else, the bowl is gouged out and sanded down, ready for a finish. So I'll take it off of there and let you see. Very smooth. Sanded down to 220. So there you go. So put it back on the lathe. And we'll go down to the lowest speed. I think what I'm going to do is use this paste finishing wax instead of polyurethane, because it's actually really smooth as it is, and my mom will be using it for yarn and stuff, so I want it to continue to be really smooth. Put it on there and you give it some time to dry, and then you buff it off. Easy peasy. Do the inside first. Alright, we'll let that sit on there for a little while and we'll come back and buff it out. Alright, so it's been sitting for a while with that wax on it. We'll go ahead and buff it out and see how it looks. Look at that shine. Yeah, that looks nice. I think I'll put another coat of wax on it. Alright, that'll sit on there we'll let that sit on there for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll be back and buff it out again. Alright, so the wax has been on there for a little while. Second coat of wax been on there for a little while, so let's polish that bad boy up and see what happens. It is looking good, looking good. Nice and shiny. I'm gonna let it dry a little bit more and buff it one more time, then we'll be ready to do the yarn hole, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. Alright, one more buff and I think we'll be ready to cut the yarn hole, so let's go. One thing in woodworking we got to worry about is humidity. It wreaks havoc on your pieces, and it's here in Florida, it's raining today, so it's nice and thoroughly humid outside, so things don't dry as fast as we'd like them to. But that looks really good. All right, so we're back over to the workbench. And the yarn hole, what the yarn hole is, it's a cutout that goes down the side of the bowl. And basically you put the ball of yarn there, and you put the single strand of yarn through this hole right here, and then as it sits like this, you can pull the yarn out, and I guess in theory the ball of yarn just stays here and the yarn comes out of the hole. So I've got to figure out where I want the yarn hole. Probably need to make it a little bit bigger than that. That looks a little better. So figure out where I'm going to put it. There's a blemish right there. If I put this right over top of that, probably just have to freehand it here. That looks pretty good. I don't think you can see it in the video, but I've drawn it out, and so I'll start to cut it with the Dremel. Hopefully that'll work. Hopefully I won't ruin the piece. See if we can get that to show up a little better with a Sharpie. How's that? Now you can see it. So here goes nothing. I went back and looked at the video, and evidently I was holding the bowl too far off screen as I was doing the Dremel work. But you can see here, this is that's the cut for the yarn. Now I've already put it on the lathe, and I've already sanded this hole out and got it good to go, and there's already another coat of wax on there on the whole bowl because I've scratched it in a couple of places or made it dull. So we're gonna buff it up, see what it looks like. Looks pretty good. Go ahead and I'll put another coat of wax on there. That first coat there I just did without the lathe turned on, and kind of rubbed it in some and got it all up in the yarn hole there. Let's do another coat. Alright, looks like we got pretty good coverage there. We'll let that sit and dry for a little while, and then we'll buff it out. Alright, so we're ready to buff out that second coat. See how it comes out. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Okay, so we finished the bowl. Saw the pictures, so I'll put those pictures up again. Sorry about the video. It just didn't go quite as I had hoped it would as far as positioning of the camera. I'll do another bowl video in the near future. I actually really enjoyed doing the bowl. And so, yeah, there's definitely going to be more bowls in the future. So, hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I'll flash some pictures of the bowl up there for you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.